Welcome to another episode of the Square and Compass podcast. Tonight's guest, or today's guest, we're recording this during the day, is Worshipful Brother Rob Moore, who I haven't had the chance to see nearly as often as normal, because you've been a guest here at the Masonic Temple of Windsor on more than a few occasions, but welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Brother Cameron.
Yeah, you are the Worshipful Master of Zion Lodge, your mother lodge, which I definitely want to talk about. Because the history of Zion Lodge, I mean, for anybody who knows, right, when your lodge is number one, named number one on the charter, there's some history there to talk about. But also your involvement with the Detroit Masonic Temple is something I really want to discuss and get into. So thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Yeah, so Zion Lodge, which I currently preside over, I'm doing my second year in the East right now. My lodge was gracious enough to kind of give me a mulligan from last year because of circumstances. But yeah, Zion Lodge is the oldest Masonic body in the state of Michigan, one of the oldest in the country, the oldest Masonic body west of the Allegheny Mountains. It was originally warranted by the Provincial Grand Lodge of New York back on April 27th, 1764. How it came about in the early days of Detroit. This is back when this was still Fort Detroit. The British, during the 7 Years' War, had taken over Fort Detroit from the French 4 years prior to that. The occupying British Army unit was the 60th Regiment of Foot, and most of the Army officers in that unit were Masons. Most of them were members of lodges in New Hampshire or New York or Montreal. And Detroit at that time was very much a wilderness. It was kind of like a wilderness outpost, and going back east to go to lodge really wasn't an option. So they petitioned the Provincial Grand Lodge of New York to start a lodge here. They did. The lodge wasn't around in Detroit for very long. The unit got transferred elsewhere. Then it kind of went dormant for a time. Then it picked up again in 1794. This time it was under the Grand Lodge of Quebec, or the Grand Lodge of Upper Canada. So that was Zion Lodge number 10. That was around until 1806, when we affiliated with the Grand Lodge of New York again. Then in 1826, there was when the first Grand Lodge of Michigan was started. And that Grand Lodge was not around for very long. It was started in 1826, and 3 years later, during the Morgan Affair, during the anti-Masonic agitation, and it affected Michigan pretty hard because we had a lot of influx of immigrants from New York. New York being a hotbed at that time of anti-Masonic activity, they kind of brought their anti-Masonic prejudices with them. So Grand Master Lewis Cass made the decision, out of the safety of the members, to shut down that Grand Lodge. At the time, it was assumed to have been temporary, but it lasted until the 1840s. And it wasn't until 1845 that the Second Grand Lodge of Michigan came about, and that's the charter we're still working under today. So we've had a total of we've had several different jurisdictions, a couple of different charters, but the lodge itself is still current form. So
it is just such a historical. It's such an important part of, I was going to say Michigan history, but really, you could argue it's such an important part of American history, kind of its growth, and it really does mirror the kind of growth and development of the United States, and the changes that it's went through are similar to the changes the United States went through over the years.
Oh yeah, very much so. And it's interesting too when people think of like the older lodges from the 18th century. They often think, justifiably so, of Massachusetts, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and whatnot. They don't really consider like the Midwest or Michigan, but yes, definitely, because the Zion Lodge is the second oldest extant institution in the city of Detroit. The only one older than us is St. Anne's Basilica. They were founded in 1701, the same year that Detroit was founded. But yeah, basically the early lodge roster was essentially kind of a who's who of the primary movers and shakers that fomented the development of Southeast Michigan and Michigan in general. Business leaders, politicians, early judges, people that were essential to the development of Michigan history and that of the Midwest in general as well. So it did deeply follow along those patterns.
I have really been trying, and I'll put some links up in the corner with some of my videos and podcasts to emphasize the importance of Freemasonry, outside of Masons themselves. And I don't think the emphasis really has been on Masonic temples, not only as being places of, a Masonic home, but really a community home, a place where a community can congregate, even if they are not Masons, even if they have no connection themselves to the craft. Many places, people have a connection to their local Masonic temple. Here in Windsor, our temple being home to, countless weddings and dances and receptions and concerts over the years. But I don't know if any Masonic temple better illustrates the connection between Freemasonry, a Masonic temple, and its community, more so than the Detroit Masonic Temple. It's just such a valuable part of Detroit outside of its Masonic services, just what it provides to the community as a whole. Can you talk a bit about that, and also what you do at the Masonic Temple, your connection to it?
Okay. Yeah, the Detroit Masonic Temple, when it was initially designed back in the 20s, the idea was just given its sheer enormity in terms of size and scope. They obviously, first and foremost, it was a building built by Masons, for Masons, but they knew that it was going to need more than that, not just to sustain itself, but to kind of remain a part of the overall fabric of the city of Detroit, the surrounding region. So it does, they designed it in terms of community and civic uses as well. In fact, several areas of the temple, the ballroom areas on the basement level and the sub-basement levels were designed more for public activity, with the Masonic activity kind of being like an ancillary use for those areas. The theater spaces as well. We have two very large theater spaces. One seats 4,404. The other seats 1,652, and those were designed primarily more for public uses as well. So they realized that this was going to need more than just Masonic use, and they wanted to have it be like a part of the enduring landscape of community life in Southeast Michigan. So my roles at the temple are several. I wear a few different hats. The main one, actually the two main ones, excuse me. I am the chief docent at the Detroit Masonic Temple, and what my job duties there specifically entail is that it's my responsibility to coordinate and schedule and confer the various tours that we do at the temple. So essentially what we do is we have several public tours per month, typically. Those are regular tours that focus primarily on the historical, the architectural, the Masonic aspects of the world's largest Masonic building. And we also have a couple behind the scenes tours that focus specifically on the maintenance, the infrastructure, the engineering aspects, several of the unfinished areas that we were not able to show on regular tours. Those are a lot of fun. Also, it's my job basically to kind of be the public face of the temple, so to speak, for interviews such as what we're doing right now. For anytime anyone has like an inquiry on the temple, sometimes they're media inquiries, sometimes they're more research inquiries. When people want to know more about that, I usually the one they go to for information on that. The other one I do is executive director of the Detroit Masonic Temple Library, Archive, and Research Center. The library has been around in one form or another since 1882. Originally, it kind of operated somewhat like along the lines of a Masonic Temple Association, in which it had representation from each one of the Masonic bodies in the city of Detroit that kind of formed a board, and they appointed a director. It had that format for a while, but as currently we're an independent 501c3 corporation, so we have a very unique relationship with the temple as a whole. We do a lot of, as you might infer, a lot of the research and a lot of the archival responsibilities at the temple. We occupy the western half of the fourth floor of the temple, so we have roughly around 2,000 square feet within a 550,000 square foot building to ourselves. That occupies the Egyptian Lodge Room, which is the one lodge room in the building that is still dedicated purely towards Masonic purposes. What happened was back in the mid 2000s, as the temple was being used more and more for public usages, specifically the lodge rooms, rather than having to go to Grand Lodge and get a dispensation each and every time, which was kind of time consuming for all concerned. A kind of a deal was struck where they would kind of do a blanket undedication of the lodge spaces, with the compromise being that one lodge room would be purely retained for Masonic purposes, which is the Egyptian room, which is kind of apropos for a Masonic library, so it worked out for all concerned. So yeah, basically we have archival items going back to the early 1800s. We have thousands of items. Many of them are books. Many of them are Masonic paraphernalia and ephemera and whatnot, regalia. We also have quite a few items related to Detroit history itself. So we're kind of we're in some respects kind of a newer, older organization. We've been around in our current form since 2016. That's when I took over. That's when we went ahead and kind of got our 501c3 back on track. It had lapsed for a little bit, but we're back. We're in full force now. So the idea is that we are trying to preserve and maintain the legacy of this Masonic monument, and try to kind of become a first-class research facility in a first-class building.
You tell me a bit about the challenges of the archival process. We've been discussing it at the Windsor Masonic Temple, some of the brothers, and also I had the chief archivist for the city of Windsor on the podcast, Michael Fish, before. The challenges of both dealing with documents that 100, 200 years old, and trying to preserve those. And also, the current challenges around electronic documentation, about trying to not only preserve those, but make sure they're formatted properly so they can be accessed down the line. I mean, are you guys looking at things like, scanning your older documents? Or I guess just I can only imagine the challenges of trying to maintain and archive these documents, some of which are, hundreds of years old.
Yeah, it certainly is a challenge, and from our end, the library here at the temple was kind of a dumping ground of sorts for years. People, when they didn't want to throw stuff out or they didn't know what to do with it, would just kind of like drop it at the doorstep and hope for the best. So we had to spend quite a while kind of sifting through everything and determining what we were going to keep and what we weren't going to keep, because one of the challenges we face is that, it wasn't designed as a library space. It was for many years a lodge room space. And we've been able to make it work for the most part. We've kind of had to repurpose several of the ante rooms and whatnot more towards storage space. We've kind of had to play Tetris, so to speak, with some of the stuff we have to kind of come up with adequate storage space. And one good thing that works in our benefit is that we have a great relationship with the Grand Lodge Library in Grand Rapids, the Michigan Masonic Museum and Library. Brother Dirk Hughes does a phenomenal job over there, and we have a great relationship. So we make at least quarterly trips out there with some of the stuff that should be preserved. We just don't have the in-house space and or resources to do it. So it works out well for everyone. As far as some of the older archival stuff, that it has been a challenge, specifically because we do have We do have a great in-house archivist and curator who actually is specifically trained for that, Brother Spencer Stevenson. So he's been doing a great job with some of our stuff. But the issue is, as far as, again, space, I mean, we need to make sure that we have like a proper hermetically sealed space for this. And again, having to deal with the challenges of the space that we have in terms of coming up with, say, like climate control. That's a bit of an issue with our building because the building does get quite warm in the summer. So there's certain stuff that just we really shouldn't be storing there. So we're dealing with that. Materials, obviously, we need to have like things like acid-free paper. I mean, we need to have like specific storage vaults for some of the stuff. That obviously is a financial issue. We do all right, but again, if we had more, frankly, if we had more money and if we had more staffing, we'd be a little further along with that aspect. But we do the best we can. Obviously, we store specifically certain items that should be stored separately. We do have some archival methods for dealing with that, but some of the things that, as far as like restoration and renovation, we have to go with professionals, obviously. So
I do really like this story, so I'm hoping you can talk a bit about it because I think it goes to what I was talking about earlier about the value of a Masonic temple to the community at large. Your Masonic auditorium is not named after a Mason, but nonetheless is named after somebody who is important or who has a connection to the Masonic temple, and his family does. Can you talk a bit about that?
oh yeah, that would be the smaller of the two theaters, the Jack White Theater. Now that's got an interesting history. That one was originally called the Scottish Rite Cathedral. That was specifically built for, at the time, the Valley of Detroit, when they were located within the Detroit Masonic Temple. They needed a larger space to perform the reunions, but not too large of an overwhelming space. So what they did is they designed kind of a mid-sized theater, so to speak, with just over 1,600 seats. That is in the traditional Gothic style in terms of architecture. They wanted to keep sort of medieval look and feel with that, with the 32nd degree of the Scottish Rite taking place in a castle with a medieval setting. The lobby too, outside that theater, so to speak, is very much in line with an overall like Gothic architectural style. What had happened in terms of the naming of that is basically what happened in the mid 2000s, the early 2010s is I'll discuss to the length that I'm able to discuss publicly. The temple at the time entered into a contract with a entertainment operator. They promised certain things that, frankly, they just didn't fully deliver on, and they left the deal, left the temple holding the bag in terms of employee information, or excuse me, employee revenue that still had to be paid in terms of back property taxes that they were going to pay. So we were also with a double whammy at the time because the county reduced the amount of time that you could float back taxes from 5 years to 2. We had a payment plan in place. We made a down payment on the back taxes, but Jack White heard about all this, and Jack has an affinity for the building. The story goes is that when his mother first moved to Detroit, as a single mother, she had a difficult time finding employment. The temple employed her as an usher for many years. In fact, it might be a story, it might actually be out there. Supposedly there's a photo out there somewhere of the head usher of the temple at the time holding Jack White when he was a baby. So hopefully one day we come across it. But what had happened is that Jack had played there many times. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and he also had connections there musically.
Oh yeah. He's played there many times. Solo acts. He's played as several bands from the White Stripes, the Dead Weather, the Raconteurs. He's actually, the last time his big show at Little Caesars Arena, he was practicing in that theater for over a week, and we had to keep it really quiet. We couldn't say anything because we didn't want people showing up and trying to bother him. But yeah, it was kind of cool. So we were listening to him practice the whole week. But no, and he has a great affinity for that building, both musically, aesthetically, personally. So that what happened is that back in the summer of 2014, he showed up at the back reception desk, and just he didn't make a big fanfare out of it. He said, I understand that that the temple is going through a little bit difficult time right now. You helped out my family in a time of need, and now I'd like to kind of repay the favor. And we told him, it's like, you don't have to do this. I mean, we certainly appreciate the gesture, but I mean, are you sure about this? I said, yes, I'm sure. So he gave a nice six-figure donation towards that. And what that allowed us to do is the money and resources that have been allocated towards paying those back taxes, we were able to put to use elsewhere throughout the building for some renovations all throughout. So that really helped out. And he didn't ask for this, but they renamed the Scottish Rite Cathedral and the Scottish Rite lobby in his honor. The Scottish Rite had moved out of the building back in 2006, so they went ahead and renamed a few things for him. So.
And I think that that's just one of those stories that, illustrates one of the things I've been trying to illustrate through some of my interviews and on the podcast is, again, that connection between or what connections can exist between a Masonic temple and the larger community. Beyond the very important, obviously, and kind of primary purpose of a meeting place for Masons or Freemasons. In this case, it's a place that has provided to the city of Detroit, employment opportunities, music opportunities, architectural heritage, and, significant revenue over the years from concerts, from events. It's been, and even here in Windsor, the number of people who have traveled to Detroit, hopefully we can do that again soon, to go to, concerts at the Masonic Temple. It facilitates so much for a community, I think. These grand Masonic temples, like the Windsor Masonic Temple, Detroit, Philadelphia, Hamilton, Bay City. I just think that that's something that is sometimes, overlooked. Even if you're not a Mason, you probably have a connection to a Masonic temple or Masonic history somewhere.
Oh yeah, and we hear that all the time, particularly like on tours. It's like, yeah, I mean, we had my high school graduation here. Like, I remember like coming to see Phantom of the Opera when I was a kid with my parents, or I remember coming here as part of like a play, things like that. It's like, and we hear a lot. I mean, yes, and more often than not, they're typically non-Masons who tell us these histories. It's like, I have such great memories of coming here when I was a kid, or like, this provided like such a great focal point in my life that I still remember that. And that really is like it really is a great point in the fact that it kind of like is part of the overall fabric within the community. And that was the idea behind that, because they realized when they were building a building like this, like, yeah, I mean, we could just have this as a purely Masonic temple and nothing else. But, at the same time, we want to make this an overall part of the fabric of the community. We want this to be a lasting legacy. I mean, not just, this very large building, in downtown Detroit, but also the fact that, Masonry seeks to be a part of the community. It seeks to be a pillar of community life. I mean, it wants to be like, tightly focused on that community. I mean, not just because the idea is not only to improve your own lives, but to improve the lives of those around you, I mean, your community as a whole. So, I mean, and the Detroit Masonic Temple in multiple ways very much fulfills that.
Yeah, I agree completely. And, I'll just say for myself, having taken both I've been lucky enough to visit the Masonic Temple as a Mason for a meeting, visiting with Zion Lodge, but also, as a member of the public, taking both the regular tour and the behind the scenes tour, both of which were amazing. If somebody wants to take those tours, I'll leave a link down in the description for this video, and I'll pin a comment, but if you want to throw the information out there too quickly.
Yeah, so what we typically do is we have at least 2 regular tours per month. Those are usually on the 1st and 3rd Sundays at 3 p.m. Next month, because of Easter, we're going to have to switch to 2nd and 4th, but we'll be back to normal after that. Those tours, usually we go 35 participants per those tours, but right now with the COVID restrictions, we're capped at 25. Those tours are $25 per person. The proceeds benefit the Detroit Masonic Temple Library, Archive and Research Center, and all the work that we're doing, as well as the ongoing temple renovations as well. Tickets had to be purchased in advance. Those tickets can be purchased at the link provided. The behind the scenes tours we typically do every other month on the third and fourth Fridays typically. Those are at 7 p.m. Those tours are a little bit different because of the areas involved on the tour. Those you have to be at least 18. Also, because for a few different reasons, because we have to have the temple engineer on the tour, otherwise we wouldn't be able to do the tour without him. And because of the areas involved and because of the unique nature of them, those are a bit more. Those are $75 per person, but same deal. The proceeds benefit the library and the temple renovations. We also do custom date tours as well, with a minimum of preferably 1 week's notice, and depending on availability, if I'm not available for whatever reason, I can get with enough notice one of my other docents to cover it. We do custom date tours to fit unique schedules. We do have, those are an additional charge. However, we do have rates available for Masonic groups and nonprofit organizations as well. So again, if you can't make one of the regular dates for whatever reason, that's an option too. And if for more information, or if you want to look at some dates at that, you can call the library at 313-832-7100, extension 227, or you can email us directly at dmtdocents@gmail.com. D as in dog, M as in Mary, T as in toy, docents, DOCENTS@gmail. So yeah, I mean, if anyone wants more information or if they're looking at some potential dates, those are the best ways to reach us.
From your perspective, or yeah, we'll do this kind of lightning round. I'm thinking back to my times at the Masonic Temple, but what is your? We'll start with some quick questions. What is your favorite room at the Masonic Temple, the Detroit Masonic Temple?
Oh boy, it's exactly, I need to pick a favorite kid. I would say overall, out of all the rooms, I would have to go with the Prelims Apartment. And again, it's a tough choice, but I would go with that one. Not only because it's very unique in terms of its architecture, it's only one of 2 rooms in the building with the Romanesque architectural style, but also just because of its its specific spiritual importance. If you've ever been to the temple, you understand it's kind of like a side room off to the chapel or the commandery asylum on the 3rd floor. And it's a very spiritually profound room. It's sometimes been used for prayer or guided meditation. Also because of its some of the details in the room. The building artisan, Corrado Parducci, was very fond of this room, and he wanted to have details that specifically stood out. This is why you see the painting on the wall. It's all hand painted. There's still several coats of lacquer over it, so it still shines over 90 years later. It also has some very unique techniques. The pillars are made out of plaster, but are designed to look like marble. It's a technique you don't see too often anymore. And you have actual marble from Parducci's hometown in the prelate's throne in the background. So just the design of that room is just so unique in many aspects. There's a lot of very detail oriented aspects of the room as well. So if somebody really told me, hey, you got to pick just one room out of 1,037, I would probably have to say I'd go with that one.
Based on your experience as a docent with the tours, what would you say is the general public's? Are there any rooms that they take the most pictures in, or what would you say is their favorite part of the tour, both the general tour and also the behind the scenes tour?
As far as the general tours, the rooms that typically get the most wow factor usually are the commandery asylum or the chapel on the 3rd floor, because again, it's unique design. It's very much designed to look like an older Gothic cathedral. Also, we get a lot of people that really like the Corinthian room, the Corinthian lodge room on the fourth floor. It's the most detailed, I would say, out of all the rooms, the most ornate. Corinthian architecture being typically the most ornate of the five classical orders. That has a lot of extra bells and whistles in that room in terms of design. People usually like to linger in that room, take a few more photos. Um, as far as the behind the scenes tours, I'd probably say the rooms that get the most people looking at, well, for one thing, the roof, because it's just an amazing view. Whenever the weather permitting, we always like to incorporate that on those tours. It's 210 feet up. You get a great panoramic view, like all of downtown Detroit. You can see across the river into Windsor. You can see areas north and east and west in Detroit from the temple. People really like that. Um, Another thing too, and it's kind of interesting because I mean, again, because it's a behind the scenes tour, I mean, you see a lot of areas that are a lot less pretty and a lot more gritty, so to speak. People really like the engine room because I mean, it's the lowest point in the temple. It's a little loud, obviously, but I mean, there's a lot of fans that are going. There's a lot of pumps that are going. The ejector well is down there, so people really think that this is. We've had a lot of people like after the tour told us that was the most interesting part of the tour. I mean, just to actually see like the literal guts of the building at work. So we get a lot of comments on that. So
And I got to bring up, across the river, the beautiful Windsor Masonic Temple, which you've visited many times. I've had the pleasure of sitting in lodge with you on many occasions. This year, so it's my understanding is, and I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm incorrect. The Detroit Masonic Temple, it was started in 1920 but finished in 1926.
correct.
Yeah, so our Masonic Temple, we purchased the land for the building in 1913, but we didn't start building until 1921, and we opened officially January of 1922, because we're obviously a much smaller temple than Detroit, but still one I'm very fond of, a beautiful temple. And this year is its 100th anniversary. If you want to talk a few moments, about your times visiting our Masonic Temple and any memories you have of the building and just what you thought of it coming over to visit.
Yeah, the Windsor Temple is, as you mentioned, like certainly a beautiful building. I remember, well, first and foremost, the hospitality of the brothers when I first joined. I first started coming when I was a relatively young Mason, not long after I was raised, and I first met a lot of the brothers from St. Andrew's Lodge. St. Andrew's Lodge and Zion Lodge enjoy a sister relationship. We have another one with Thistle Lodge in Amherstburg. We actually helped found that lodge back in 1801. But I remember specifically the lodge rooms too. Just the lodge rooms, obviously, like a lodge room in the States compared to a lodge in Canada is going to have some similarities, but also a few distinct differences. So I remember too, like I was really enamored with the design of the lodge rooms. I remember like that staircase going upstairs. I always liked walking up that one. That was really interesting as far as going up there that way. And yeah, just the design from the outside, from the exterior, just the various the way that the design kind of correlates with the interior of the building as well. That was always interesting to me as well, because obviously, the Detroit Masonic Temple, it has a lot of has a very grand exterior. There's a lot of design details, that correlate with that. But the Windsor Masonic Temple too has a lot of it's a very distinct part of an overall whole it's very admirable the way that it was designed as far as that goes. So I really it's a very and I would encourage all brothers, when the situation allows, when the border reopens, to definitely go and visit. I tell brothers all the time throughout lodges in Southeast Michigan and beyond. It's like, if you've never visited the Windsor Masonic Temple, I mean, if you've never seen a degree there, I mean, I would definitely encourage you to do so. So, and I always do. So.
Speaking of degrees, I understand you have one coming up yourself, worshipful sir. What's going on with Zion Lodge? What type of events do you have coming up in the future?
Well, this Wednesday, the 24th, we have a Master Mason degree. It's actually it's going to be the first one that I confer as a Master of the Lodge. So I'm a little nervous, but I got a lot of good help. And this is our first one in a little over 2 years. So we've been practicing. I trust it's going to go well. We are hoping to do some form of anniversary event or dinner or something along those lines on April 24th. Usually, under normal circumstances, we have a festive board style dinner every time, and usually late April. Sometimes it kind of extends into May. We don't, it's not an actual festive board because non-Masons are present, but it is a dinner in the style of a festive board. It has the same layout, the same program and all that. We obviously couldn't do that last year. We're probably not going to do the full event this year, but we're going to do some form of that. So we're still in the discussion stages of that. We've got an honors dinner coming up in May. We have several events coming up at the Detroit Yacht Club. We've got a great relationship with them on Belle Isle, where we do outdoor style picnics. Worked out great last year. We did one in June and one in August. So those are some of the events we have coming up right now. We've got a couple of brothers still to raise yet. We've got a few left over, last year that we weren't able to do Master Mason degrees last year for the most part. So we're catching up on that again. But no, yeah, Zion is going really well. We've got a great young core of officers who are very talented, not just in terms of ritual, but in terms of planning, in terms of focus as well. So we're going through a strategic planning process right now. So that's going really well. So the idea is to kind of set the lodge up for future growth and development as well. We've got a lot of interest from men who are learning to become, wanting to know more about Freemasonry, potentially to join. Last October, we had a candidates event, a prospective members event, and I was really pleasantly surprised. We had over 25 men show up. So it's kind of a nice problem to have. But no, those are some of the things coming up in Zion Lodge. We'll have at least one degree every month going into at least June and possibly beyond. So.
What that I think brings up and kind of I would say the main dilemma facing Masonic lodges and Masonic temples more in general, the grander ones, right, is this idea of when the Windsor Masonic Temple was built, when Detroit was built, it was a time of pretty rapid expansion in the craft. Probably the most rapid expansion in the craft. Maybe second only to 1950s. I know in Ontario, for example, it was in the 1920s that we reached over 100,000 members. So, these Masonic temples, such as Windsor, Detroit, Bay City, they were kind of built at a time when Freemasonry was growing very rapidly. I've talked to several brethren who were part of larger Masonic temples and are either in the process of, selling them or considering selling them. I guess, my question is, from a preserving these buildings perspective, do you think the emphasis needs to be on, growing the craft to bring in more members to increase kind of revenue base, or is it looking at outside partnerships more often and partnering with different entertainment groups or whatever it is, not ones that leave you holding the bag per se, but groups that will more outside partnerships, a private public space type of deal. I talked to Daryl Babbitt about this from Edmonton, which is their experience of the same dilemma. I guess my question is, do you think that the Masonic craft can grow again to a sufficient level like it was the 20s to sustain these Grand Masonic temples, or do you think it's a combination of that plus partnering with outside groups? Like, where do you see, or do you think it's possible to maintain these buildings at our current levels?
Well, my personal Masonic philosophy, and there's a great quote from the Masonic author H.L. Haywood, is that we don't need more men in Masonry. We need more Masonry in men. As you mentioned, there were several levels of growth throughout, both in Michigan and Ontario, that kind of correlated during different events in the, especially in the Detroit area in the late 19th century. As Detroit began to grow, we had a membership jump, and again after World War I into the 20s, and then again after World War II into the late 40s, 1950s. So there were kind of external factors that kind of drove that growth. Frankly, I think what happened is that you kind of had a you raised things to a point where it kind of diluted the essence of the craft, so to speak. Lodges kind of grew to the point where they kind of became artificially inflated to the point where it just wasn't going to be a sustainable level. I mean, there were lodges for a while in Southeast Michigan that had 2,000 and more members. And the problem is that, I mean, when you get into a level like that, you can't really intimately know your brothers within a lodge like that. I mean, you kind of become a victim of your own success in several aspects. So I think overall the craft kind of became a victim of its own success in many ways. And when you had membership levels level off, it's not so much I think that we need more men in Masonry. It's nice, but I think for one thing, we need to take care of the members that we have. We need to follow up with them, which is why we need robust mentorship and education programs, which is why we need to make sure that every brother who comes into a lodge feels welcome, that he has a role to play, that his individual unique talents are going to not only going to help the lodge, but are going to help him expand his own Masonic experience. I sometimes get in a little trouble when I say this, but I'm a pretty big proponent of traditional observance Masonry, smaller lodges, no more than a couple candidates a year at a time, a very initiatic focus, a focus on mentorship, a focus on education, a focus on higher standards. That's kind of my traditional focus as far as that goes. But as far as the temples themselves, well, specifically here in Detroit, we're very heavily dependent on events typically, which is why COVID has been a unique challenge here. So traditionally, we have quite a few concerts going on. AEG Entertainment in March of 2019 took over management, not ownership, management of our theater spaces. And they've done a really great job as far as renovating them. They put several $1 million into some much needed renovations of both theaters. And that's kind of been somewhat of, I won't call it a silver lining, it's more of a tin lining right now, with the theater spaces being shut down for concerts. A lot of the construction, a lot of the renovations has been able to be accelerated. So what ordinarily they had to plan around, a couple concerts a week. I mean, this time they can just kind of focus on the construction itself. So it'll get done a lot faster. And when we do open up for concerts again, that'll all be ready to go. So it's that's one okay thing to come out of this. But corporate events have been a very important revenue generator for us as well. Typically, under normal circumstances, we get several large-scale corporate events that take up a great deal of the spaces all throughout the building. Usually, the Society of Automotive Engineers is here all the time. Quicken is here quite frequently. Forbes did a very large event here back in October of 2019 that again took up most of the building in terms of the public spaces, the Masonic spaces as well. So things like that are very important from us in terms of a revenue standpoint. Weddings are important. The temple has frequently been in the top wedding destination lists in Metro Detroit quite often. Under normal circumstances, we have a wedding here usually every Saturday. So that goes well. So overall, In terms of the older temples, I think what they're going to have to do is just come up with partnerships that are going to be able to preserve them going into the future. Obviously, you had to be careful with who you talk to. I mean, who you work with here for the most part as well. But ultimately, if they want to keep it in terms of a Masonic space, I mean, they're going to have to kind of they're going to have to be willing to break paradigms, so to speak. They're going to have to be willing to tread new ground as far as that goes. And obviously, you have to respect the Masonic aspect of that space, but they're definitely going to have to be willing to kind of, actually don't use this term, kind of think outside the box, so to speak. So,
Yeah, thinking outside the box is one of those things that Masons are not always the best at, but it strikes me as being probably pretty important to start thinking about some of these paradigm shifts as we move forward. From a as a worshipful master, both last year and this year, I guess, how have you tried to be a worshipful master, or how have you found it being different to be a worshipful master, or just a lodge operating during the time of COVID? With so many of I know you mentioned you had the younger group of officers, but so many of our demographics do skew older in terms of membership to more vulnerable populations. I guess just what type of unique challenges has both the Detroit Masonic Temple and your lodge faced during the last couple of years?
well, last year in particular, we wanted to, and many lodges did similar things as well, is that we wanted to make sure that our members were taken care of. So we made a point to make sure to contact members, to make sure that let them know is if there's something they needed from the lodge, please, I mean, don't hesitate to let us know, because I think sometimes there are brothers that their pride kind of inhibits them from reaching out and admitting like, hey, I might need some additional assistance. So we want to make sure, like, look, brothers, don't let that stigma get in the way. I mean, if you need some help, reach out to us, let us know. We will do everything we can to fulfill our Masonic obligations, provide the assistance that binds us with that cable toe. As far as unique challenges, obviously a lot of initial things that we had planned in terms of events basically had to not happen last year. But we kind of refocused on just kind of internal communications in terms of, obviously, planning for future events, doing strategic planning, the process that we're on right now, and also just getting to know each other better. Because I think a lot of times it happens, you show up to lodge, you do a degree, you have a meeting, you have a bite to eat, and you kind of go on your way. So we're trying to avoid that. We're trying to actually get to know each other in terms of on a more intimate basis. We're trying to really kind of like, sit down and get to know our brothers on a personal level, which we should do. But, we're actually trying to put that in practice. So as far as that goes, so in terms of our overall demographics are kind of shifting as well. I mean, originally we had, this is a while ago, we had more young families in the lodge and whatnot. We really don't so much anymore. Our lodge is not rapidly aging, but it is getting a bit older. I mean, we do have some younger professionals within our lodge. We do our median age in terms of I'd say going back the last 5 years in terms of our new candidates has probably been about 30 to 35. So not really young, but younger. So again, we kind of have to kind of model our lodge on something that best benefits our brothers, best benefits our newer members, while kind of keeping in mind the fact that we do have a lot of older brothers as well. So it's kind of this is kind of something I found as a master. You kind of have to balance interests in terms of your different demographics, your different social standpoints from all your brothers, and try to. You don't want to do a one-size-fits-all approach, but at the same time, you want to do things that are going to appeal to everyone as well. The other thing too, in terms of community outreach as well, we what we do as far as a charity, we do a ramp program where we build ramps for wheelchair ramps for people in need, and that's not only has it been really great to help them out, but it's also been really good PR for the lodge as well. So that gets us out there. And another thing too is that in terms of the temple, unfortunately, for a while, it kind of had this this clubhouse meets bunker type mentality. The neighborhood around the temple kind of went downhill beginning in like the 1960s into the 1970s. So rather than kind of see what they could be done to kind of influence like positive social change, they kind of hunkered down and really didn't do much in terms of the overall community. The lodges kind of became more like commuter style lodges. It's changed somewhat. I mean, we have a lot more residents from the city within our lodges now, especially within Zion, but for a while we didn't. It was primarily suburban. They didn't really do a whole lot in terms of overall local community interaction and outreach and whatnot, but that's something we're looking to change. We're looking to establish relationships with Detroit-based institutions, Detroit-based charities. Another thing too that's really come along too is that, well, at least for Zion Lodge, we have a really great, robust relationship with a local Prince Hall affiliated lodges as well. We do frequent intervisitation. The Prince Hall brothers come and visit us quite frequently. They take parts in our degrees, so that's been a really great positive development. So,
Yeah, the kind of connection, or what you're talking about, I do, I do wonder about that. I don't have any research myself on it, but that is a really interesting kind of point. The city versus suburban versus kind of rural divides or differentiate, are we seeing with these Masonic temples, especially ones located like in the heart of a city, are we seeing a lot of, as you said, commuter Masons coming in, or are we seeing growth within the city? That'd be a really interesting thing to go into more. I wonder about that.
yeah, yeah. In terms of demographics, I know in Michigan in particular, I mean, we have many strong rural lodges that have just been mainstays of the community for quite some time that are holding their own in terms of membership, in terms of overall community involvement, in terms of membership development as well. I belong to, I hesitate to call it a rural lodge. It's kind of more of a small town lodge, Myrtle Lodge number 89 in Belleville. And they meet in the oldest continually operating purpose-built Masonic temple in the state of Michigan. It was originally built in, I believe, 1859, and so that's different. I mean, they do active community involvement, and we have members who may not make it to lodge very often, but the lodge is very much near and dear to them. So that goes too. Yeah, that really would be in terms of development, in terms of like the interrelationship between how it affects like urban, suburban, and rural lodges as well. I mean, I personally, I mean, I'm kind of an outlier. I'm an active member in 5 different lodges. 2 of them are urban. 2 of them, I guess you could call suburban, and 1 you could call semi-rural. So it's always interesting to see like the unique challenges, unique demographics that face those lodges in terms of their location, in terms of their overall makeup and external factors as well. So
Yeah, that would be an interesting. That'd be a very interesting kind of piece of research. I mean, just even something like commute times would be fascinating. How long does the average Mason have to travel to get to his Masonic temple or Masonic lodge? I mean, does having a Masonic temple in the city, does that act as advertising or not? If somebody passes it by every day, are they more likely to be interested in joining, or are you seeing people driving, half an hour to an hour to get to lodge? It'd be a neat question. I would just be interested even in the average commute time back and forth.
yeah, and in terms of overall visibility as well. And it's I think it's important that Masonic temples kind of keep them up in terms of overall image, overall visibility. I mean, I don't want to say anything. I mean, obviously, I mean, in terms of like a temple that's being kept up, in terms of being well maintained, in terms of a temple that may need some external attention, that kind of it correlates in terms of like possibly like a prospective candidate. I mean, their overall impression of Mason. obviously the Detroit Masonic Temple. I mean, you can't miss it. I mean, it takes up an entire city block. It's this big grand castle looking monument. But I mean, there's other temples and other areas as well. I mean, in terms of what they can do to keep up their overall image and visibility. I mean, whether that's a little bit of lipstick and rouge, whether that's a little bit of like external improvements, just making sure the property is kept up, making sure the lawn's mowed. I mean, making sure the parking lot looks decent, little things like that. But no, yeah, I mean, it's always important to keep a good public face of that as well. So.
Yeah, it's stuff like that is cool. I wonder, I don't know if there's been enough research in some of those kind of more socio-demographic. I've been to some talks about millennials in Freemasonry and now Gen Z in Freemasonry, but the actual kind of nuts and bolts of is there a radius at which people kind of stop being interested in Freemasonry? So is there like a bell curve where people will travel 1 hour, but if you go out hour and 50 minutes, it just drops rapidly? Or is there, what about, is there an income gap? Are we seeing Masons only with a certain income level join? Or, I just wonder, even, what age are they when they first join versus, is there an age at which attendance drops off and comes back? I don't know if there's been a lot of kind of nuts and bolts demographic research done. It seems like it's all been kind of general stuff on quote unquote Gen Z, millennials, but no specific numbers to really sink the teeth into.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure if this is still the case, but for a while, the Masonic Service Association of North America kept statistics and whatnot for a while. They looked at all the Grand Lodges throughout North America and tried to kind of keep up those statistics as well, and kind of see growth patterns in terms of demographics, in terms of societal changes. I'm not quite sure how detailed the statistics were and how far the research went, but they might still do something like that. I'm not sure exactly. But no, yeah, I agree. I mean, it would definitely be really interesting to see like the overall, just in terms of like a radius, like how far people are willing to travel, in terms of like the overall makeup, in terms of membership statistics. So yeah, that's I might. I'm secretary at the Michigan Lodge of Research, so I might put a bug in the ear of our brothers who have a background in statistics, demographics, and whatnot. See if they might want to take a look at that as far as research. I'd be interested to see those results as well.
Well, if you get those results, please send them to me, and you can even throw something down in the comments about that, would be very cool. And speaking of, I'll do my typical plugs, which I never do. So they're not typical at all, but I'm supposed to do them. Hit the like button, comment, subscribe. Give me money on Patreon if you want to do that. And you can go to, if you prefer just the audio, you can find Sprung Compass on Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, all that good stuff. From your neck of the woods, I know you mentioned before, but one more time, because everybody who can, really, Mason or non-Mason, really should do what they can to visit the Detroit Masonic Temple and take part in those tours and step inside really a historical treasure of our area. So just one more time, if you want to throw the quick plugs in for the tours, the website and phone numbers, and anything else you want to plug coming up in either your lodge or Freemasonry or the temple in general.
Yeah, brothers, it's I'm a little biased, but the Detroit Masonic Temple is something that really every Mason should see at least once. It is definitely top 5 in terms of enduring Masonic monuments. Just the amazing amount of the history and architecture in the temple is enough for all Masons and non-Masons in general to see as well. Website's coming for the library. In the meantime, follow us on Facebook, Detroit Masonic Temple Library, Archive, and Research Center. That has a link to all our happenings, all the ticket links for tours. Again, tours typically happen every first and third Sunday of the month. During the summer months, we typically move those to Friday evenings. It's a little bit cooler at the temple during the evening, during those times. Also, for Zion Lodge, you can find us on Facebook as well. Our website is zion1764.com. You can find us there, and that's being updated as well. So yeah, brothers and non-Masons, it's definitely worth checking out the world's largest Masonic temple. It is truly a sight to behold.
And with that, you'll find those links in the description to this video also. Worshipful Brother Rob Moore, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to see you over Zoom, and knock on wood, it'll be in person again before too long.
Yeah, Brother Cameron, thank you so much for having me on this afternoon. Been a long time watcher of the podcast, and it's great to finally be a guest. Yeah, and hopefully when the border eventually gets reopened, I would love to come back to the beautiful Windsor Masonic Temple and see you and all the brothers of the various lodges that meet there. It's love to get back there as soon as I can do so.